Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming and being here for a very special fireside chat. Before you make the joke, let me make it first. The fire's right here. Very warm, very nice. We'll be talking about, as this suggests, local solutions to global challenges for entrepreneurs today. And we have two very incredible guests. First, to my left, Boise Mayor Lauren McLean. She is committed to creating a city for everyone and has worked tirelessly toward that goal, advocating for open space conservation, tackling housing and homelessness side by side with the community, and leading nationally acclaimed climate action efforts. She's also Boise's first elected female mayor. Please welcome Mayor Lauren McLean. Second, to my far left, please welcome Special Representative for Commercial and Business Affairs with the State Department's Bureau of Economic and Business Affairs, Dilawar Syed. He is a senior U.S. diplomat charged with advancing trade, commercial, and economic policies overseas for America's workers and the middle class to help create well-paying jobs for America's workers at home. Special Representative Syed leads efforts to support the export activities of U.S. companies through commercial advocacy and to create a level playing field for U.S. companies abroad. Syed draws from his experience as an entrepreneur and a public servant who has advocated for inclusive entrepreneurship at the federal and state level. Please welcome Special Representative Syed. Thank you both so much for being here. Mayor, let's start with you. I guess just lay the foundation for what we're going to be talking about here today.
Sure. Thank you, Justin.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody, for coming. It's great to see quite a few familiar faces and even more folks that I haven't had the chance to talk with. I actually wanted just to kick this off with just some thoughts on this event, the role of Trailhead, the importance of Boise Entrepreneur Week and entrepreneurs in general in our community. Because it's great to be back fully in person and to be able to not just be looking at the person that's asking me questions, but to see so many folks that have signed up to be part of this the whole week. And the reason I believe that that's important is because so often the best ideas, the energy and motivation one needs to move forward with an idea, and then oftentimes that funding that you need for an idea comes from the interactions that you really only get in person. And Boise Entrepreneur Week was designed to do just that, to create space for those of us with new ideas that are interested in learning new things, connecting with those that do have ideas, and then helping make it happen, could come together. And so for a couple years we didn't get to do that, and it's so important that we're all here doing that now. And I want to say too that the city needs you. The city needs this event. Our state needs this event, and I have a feeling you'll say our nation and world needs more events like this because of that chance to interact and grow ideas and then leave with potentially new partnership and new customers. And as the city of Boise, we really appreciate the partnership that we have with Trailhead and all of the organizations and people. We've got Jason here, one of the founders, Jason Crawforth, all the organizations that make it possible, that have made the purse possible this week for the pitch competitions, but the role that Trailhead continues to play in helping launch the folks that are creating businesses here. And then I just want to talk too about the importance of innovation that this week celebrates, but I'd say our city has always celebrated. We're founded on the hopes and dreams that became real of innovators that came through this area, recognizing that there were folks here before us. But our history has been one of coming up with crazy, if you will, ideas. I mean, we figured out how to move water really backwards and away from where it ought to go and into a desert to feed fields that later fed us. But we've come up with ideas, we've tried new things. As the most isolated city now of our size in the country, we've so often relied on that kind of can-do-itness attitude that we have as Boiseans. And we wouldn't be who we were without that history of innovation, persistence, partnership, and that partnership making it possible to launch, whether it be companies like that became Simplot or Albertsons, or now the things that have come through Trailhead like Lumini. And so the role that the organization this week and each and every one of you that are here plays in our continued history of innovation and ultimately in making possible the life that we lead here, the investments that we have and the prosperity that is here today and will come is key. And so it's wonderful to be back here to be able to welcome the special representative to our great city and to have a conversation about the role of local solutions to global challenges.
Special Representative, please.
Well, thank you. And first of all, let me say congratulations for having this convening. And it sounds like it's an institution you're building. And having been an entrepreneur and benefited from these ecosystems, I can tell you this is where great things are built, and it takes a village. So really super impressed. We were just talking with TM earlier, you and other founders who brought this all possible. Thank you for having me. It's an honor sharing the stage with you. Let me just quickly clarify in terms of like understanding what my role is. As special representative, I represent private sector at the State Department. And now you may be surprised that there's a champion for private sector at the State Department. And the answer is yes. And it's a special emphasis given that this is a role that advances that. And here's why. Without commercial diplomacy, we can't have a successful economic diplomacy. And without that, we can't have a successful foreign policy. Our biggest asset in the world one of the biggest assets in the world is the fact that we have a vibrant private sector, free enterprise system. And that is still our strength in the world. And we are, as you all know, those of you who are building businesses, and I have built my share of businesses, we are in an increasingly competitive environment globally. So governments have to lean in, not to carry the bag for you, but to help ensure that there's a level playing field. Otherwise, we will not retain our leadership globally. And that is really the intent, and a lot of what I'll share today is from that lens. Now, you said something, Mayor McLean, that the world needs you. And yes, the world needs you, all you, as well as your city needs you. And here is why. And I'm sharing this with you from this incredible privilege I have to operate at this level for the country. We are truly passing through an extraordinary moment. I don't think any one of us in our generation, and we have folks here who may represent a couple of generations, have seen what's happening in the world right now. Number one, a global pandemic. The great equalizer. Literally every country, every continent, every community, rich, poor, every race, it impacted. We're still not fully out of it. And it's great to see none of us felt the need to wear a mask today. But we still are just still coming from it. It's a massive phenomenon that has not touched this world as a crisis. Public health, economic crisis, a crisis of confidence in once-in-a-century phenomenon. Number two, war in the heart of Europe. I joined the State Department 3 weeks before Ukraine was attacked. And we were seeing this play out, and if you recall, news cycle at the time, the administration was very clear with the president of Ukraine that, look, this is going to happen. And my job immediately became fielding CEOs' calls for the secretary who were jumping in to say, what can we do? By the way, I've never, ever seen, I've been involved in civic causes, I've been a CEO myself, we've never seen a groundswell, the kind of groundswell we saw in support of Ukraine. It's now, what, 7 months, 8 months? And I think you all know this, there is no end in sight. This hasn't happened, again, in nearly 80 years. And third, climate. What climate is doing, and here Mayor has incredible leadership, it is just done stuff just in recent months that we haven't seen this, whether it's drought in the western part of the country, whether it's floods in places like Pakistan, a third of the country's underwater, like stuff that we read about, but it's actually playing out in front of our eyes. So when you look at all these challenges, you're like, wow, these are not ordinary events. But as an entrepreneur, as someone who's been in your shoes, I also think that these challenges represent incredible opportunities to build. And we are seeing some of the things that we are putting out as administration, but they really mean that entrepreneurs, and we really mean Boise entrepreneurs and founders and small businesses and large businesses like my corner of the world have to lean in and address things like supply chain, there's been a huge emphasis on that. We just saw that, I think this year's trend from Crunchbase, that one of the largest spikes in investments have been in supply chain solutions. And we know that entrepreneurs all over the world are creating applications that will address that gap. Solutions that don't ag tech or climate, right? There are folks who can build apps here that can have global impact. So I just want to share with you that this is the worldview we see every day, but we also know that we absolutely cannot meet this moment if we don't think of solutions that even that you are starting here that can have a global impact. And if anyone is wondering, wow, can I really address it at that level? The answer is yes. You know, I spent about 25 years of my career in Silicon Valley. And I was just sharing with Sean earlier that when I moved back to the Bay Area after business school, Google hadn't gone public. And I'm not 100 years old. This is 15, 20 years old phenomena. These are startups. These were startups. Every single app that we use today that has changed our world, whether it's ride-sharing apps or apps that we use to order food, that are global, they're global. You know, those were built with a global view from day one. They may not have acted on them globally because they didn't have the capacity. But all these entrepreneurs, many of them, and God willing, see in this room coming in down the years, you know, had that worldview. So that's what we're trying to see, and this is why we're showing up in our communities to talk about this global challenge and say, how do we encourage more of you, you know, to think global from day one, even as you cannot fully act global right away. So with that, I'll let you pass.
Fantastic. Well, both of you talked about opportunities. What do you, and this is for both of you, we'll start with the mayor, some of the key opportunities for startups. How can they capture this moment, and what sort of support can they expect from the city and then the State Department?
Sure. You know, I think you said something that's really important, and we tried to use this frame as a city government when we were going through in the early days of COVID and then making sure that we could respond and provide service to folks. And that is, you can look at everything as challenges and really hard to get through, or you can look through it all as opportunities. And so I'd say the opportunity for startups, for entrepreneurs, even if you aren't at the startup stage yet, is to really think about how much the world has changed in the last 24 months, not even 24 months really, and then to harness some of the challenges and lived experiences we have, connect that to the changes in behavior that we've all experienced and can show that has made the world a little bit different, and then take that idea and turn it into a reality here in the city, not just to provide a solution locally, but ultimately to bring that to scale. And how the city wants to help at this time is, you know, partnership with Trailhead. We continue to do that in terms of investing in a space and the support that the organization gives. But as our city has grown, so have the resources. So we now have capital that is based here that's seeking to support startups. That didn't exist 3, 4, 5 years ago in terms of being based here in Boise. We have a much more diverse array of potential employees and partners for each of you as our city has grown. We still haven't figured out, and I think it's a huge opportunity, how to tap into the folks that have ported their jobs here and take advantage of the background, talents, and expertise they have, but convince them that they should actually put all those to play and into work for you know, businesses that are starting here. So I'd say that that's another opportunity that many organizations and people smarter than me are trying to figure out how to help folks do that. And then I'd say the other opportunity is that, you know, in a week like this in particular, you've got the private sector, the funding sector, the entrepreneurs, and public sector all having conversations about what could be next, what's happening today, but then what could be next, and taking advantage of that, the space that this week provides, I think, is a great opportunity too. We have, you know, I think about it in terms of how things have changed. When you were talking about that, I thought of 2 stories. The first is like when I spent a year overseas, as many college students do, and my now husband came to visit, and we were in the middle of this plaza, and of course everybody shops outside, and so I was looking at some shoes, and my husband, well, he was my boyfriend then, says, "I'm gonna take your picture and put it on the internet." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, "I don't want you to post my picture where people can see it." And now, I mean, so that was 25 years ago, and who Now you'd think you're not going to post a picture on the internet, and how much that has changed. And I can even remember the place that I was. I was in a teeny tiny office leading the open space, Foothills Open Space campaign. I was on my first cell phone, and somebody said, oh, you can look this information up on Google. And I was like, what's Google? And they're like, well, you Google it. And I'm like, you Google something? And then so I typed in google.com on my computer, and I was like, oh my God, there's so much information here. That was just 21 years ago. And so all of the change that we've seen, coupled with, as you mentioned, the impacts of climate and the need to innovate to create solutions so that we can thrive, because there will be global winners and losers, and Boise, we want Boise to be a winner, so let's innovate to create solutions and follow some of the energy track. Coupled with the impacts of the pandemic, but also what it taught us, that we can change our behavior on a dime, innovate even as a city government and go virtual because we must, creates a lot of opportunity, both here locally, but then we now have the platforms to connect on a much larger scale for our innovators and entrepreneurs that are here.
Special representative opportunities.
So, what's interesting about at a place like State Department, that we are, given the scale, the work we do is really two-part. One is be the convener of literally the world, and two, affect policy, which impacts literally millions and millions in this country and billions around the world in a positive way. Now, when it comes to convener, let me start with the opportunities for you. So what's in it for a startup here? So I'll just give you a couple of examples. The president is hosting Africa's Leaders Summit in mid-December in Washington, D.C. It's the first time we're going to have heads of the state from the entire continent show up in a very long time. And we've been in the process of rebuilding alliances. Along with that summit, we're going to have a day-long event, actually 2 days long event, just on business, which will be focused on the continent of Africa. And I think you all have heard Africa, this is this century is for Africa, because it's a massive continent, still so much opportunity, huge youth bulge, and we haven't really engaged, if you will, actively. Now, we are making sure that when we convene the business community, it's not just the big businesses. While we want them to be there, we obviously want our large job creators to be successful, but we also want to open them up, democratize access to mid-sized firms, to startups who have interesting solutions around supply chain, food security, climate action. So that's one area where would love to engage with you, and I have my team member here, Veera, if you could show your hand back there. If you're interested in engaging with the continent, we're happy to have you be part of that conversation. So those are the kind of examples where we can bring the world to you. Another one, we were just talking before the talk, the president hosted Summit of the Americas in Los Angeles in June. There is a number of events that are happening, the Cities Summit, which are bringing cities from across the Americas right in our neighborhood. We've actually invited your mayor to be part of that in Denver, which each of these will have sideline events which are focused on business. So we are striving very hard to bring the business community, but democratize access to startups as well. So that's just one big observation, something to share with you. The second thing that I would say is, at a more policy level, and this may get a little bit geeky for you, but it's important. I have done in my 7 months 8 bilateral visits. When I go abroad, I am meeting with finance ministers, econ ministers. I'm meeting with they have startup ministers in many countries. They have AI ministers in the country. And one of the two main things that I'm advocating for is IP. Making sure our IP is protected. Making sure that if you're building an AI app, you can with confidence export to a country and make sure that cross-border data flow is protected in your favor. Micron, homegrown company that you all are proud of, has had their share of IP. We're advocating on their behalf. Now that's a policy that impacts the entire ecosystem, not just in Boise, frankly, across the country, if not the entire Western world. And we are constantly pushing for those kind of things to make sure that there are enabling environments for our startups, for our exporters, to be able to export without feeling like somebody's going to steal, if you will, your ideas or IP. In addition to that, I would say that, and this is something that often founders early stage think, who cares about dealing with our export councils? But you actually have a lot of resources with our embassies around the world. Each embassy has a commercial section that can help you. We have Commerce Department's Export Assistance Center right in Boise. So let's say if you have a product or a good or service and you want to export, you should be engaging with the USIAC. They can offer you very specific help, which, by the way, you're paying for as a taxpayer. And so I have learned this the hard way now that I'm on the other side, that wow, I should have benefited from these things now that I know that they exist. And so I would highly welcome that those resources from Commerce Department that we work with very closely to help you export. But then there are things at a policy level that we are advocating for you, and we'll be actually happy to take feedback of things that you care about, that we'll make sure that that are part of our push when we engage globally. So I know this is pretty broad, but really at this level, our remit is to focus on broad policy that affects ecosystem in a more general way.
Fantastic. And speaking of feedback, we'll be able to take a few questions at the end of this, so think of some of those while we're going here. You talked about Micron. Mayor McLean, I imagine you're pretty excited about Micron's announcement, multi-billion, it's with a B, dollar expansion. Can you talk about Boise's history of entrepreneurship and how this expands on that, celebrates that? Because Micron is a number of years removed from being a startup.
Yeah, it is.
My history is not great, but I think so.
It's so interesting, though, when you take a tour of their of the hallway around the fab that still exists there, or the clean room that's there. They have the listing of all of their patents. So to get to the IP issues, and there were so few of them. There were many years, they were founded in what, 72, 73? 72?
78.
78. Okay. I thought they were older than me, but I guess
Wow.
they aren't.
You're young.
The first years are all through, really, 97, 98 are all on one panel. And then it was after that you just see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of patents listed in the coming years. So it's a company that's been around for a while, but getting back to so much has changed in the last 20 years. It's really been that 20 years where we've seen, for Micron in particular, and the IP piece and the patents really explode. $15 billion of investment, 2,000 jobs within 10 years, and about 12 to 15,000 ancillary jobs. The largest investment that this state has seen. I want to call out Sean Keithley and Andrea Cantor that are here, that were key in our conversations with the company in the last year and now several months in making this happen. And I would say a couple things on this. As I mentioned before, we do have a history of innovation here, and Micron started here, but it wasn't a given that they would decide to make their first investment in a fab in 2 decades here. And so we had a lot of conversations in partnership with the state, in partnership with Idaho Power, and others about how to make that happen. We believed we were the right fit, but we had particular goals when it came to what would be here. And we wanted to make sure that we brought, and we have R&D here now, research and development, but we wanted the next generation of R&D to be here. We wanted that what would come from the R&D to be explored here and to have a fab that was the right size for our community. And what this investment does is it keeps the R&D here, it grows it. And then they'll explore and create first here, and then they're in Syracuse this week, marking that mega fab. Then they'll ship what they've perfected to be mass manufactured elsewhere. This matters because of the offshoots from the R&D facilities of Micron in the last 30 years. So when you think about kind of the multiplied effect of innovators that are here developing something new that has national security implications, it has daily life implications, but they're figuring out how to do it here. They're innovating. We are their lab city. And they choose to leave Micron and do other things. That innovation remains. The offshoots we expect to see multiply. It also means that a lot of other organizations that support what I'd say in plain speak, the brains of the company, that support the technology and development of the company end up here. And that matters as well because of the opportunity it creates. Today at our city council meeting, we were actually talking about how the city is preparing to be able to support Micron in hitting their goals in terms of development. And it's 6th and 7th graders today in Boise that 10 years from now will be graduating from college. And let's say they go to Boise State and they get a material science degree or a CS degree like my husband did, or they go elsewhere and do that, they actually will have so many more job opportunities here at home if they choose to come back. And having that opportunity for our kids and theirs is key because it'll actually create those high-paying jobs, the opportunity to be creative and to innovate here in Boise. They'll come back for that. And then at some point in their future, they will likely join many of you in terms of dreaming about what's next and putting the skills and the brains and the creativity they have to work for whatever comes next for them and ultimately for our community.
Special Representative, you have a global portfolio, I'm told. What do you think are some of the top markets for entrepreneurs, and why is Boise at the very top of that list?
Well, it's Boise, so it has to.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice.
Well, I think, look, it's hard to pick a market or a region, but I would just say when you just look at what's happening in the world, and we talked about some of the challenges and opportunities, a couple of areas are just very hot. And not only they address global challenges, but they're also could be profitable. One is around food security. And you just look at how many millions of people are displaced, whether through floods or drought, the importance of ag tech, and we know that there are ag tech companies coming from Boise, and this is part of the ecosystem here. That's huge. I spent some time in Central Valley, California. That's where I'm from, and we know there's a work that's also happening in that region. So I would call that one segment, if you will, that I think we should have more entrepreneurs spend more time on, and we should encourage ag tech. Other one, just from the region standpoint, I would say Africa. I would look at more closely. My last trip was in Algeria. I'd never been to Algeria. It's the largest country in area in Africa, the second biggest Arab population. I met with the CEO of Algeria Telecom, and I said, what's your roadmap for the next 5 years and 10 years? And he came up with a list of things that we have done here a long time back. And I'm like, where are US companies talking to these major telcos? And by the way, when we don't talk, who talks to them, right? And so there is just so much opportunity, and this is why we have to start to get out there, spend time in these regions, cultivate relationships, build better understanding. It is going to happen from Boise, trust me. But we have to get out there and also have those people come out here. So those are two ways I look at it. I'm going to be at APEC Summit in Southeast Asia. We also know that's a huge region. When you look at Indo-Pacific, huge emphasis the president has put on in that region. Massive market. We don't want, if you will, just China to be the only game in town. So that's how we look at broadly. But I would say from an application standpoint, segments, food security, renewables, huge. Supply chain applications we know are going to be needed. And just on Micron a little bit, when I actually spent some time, a couple of hours this morning, looking at the patent wall and seeing a gentleman who gave us a tour, he himself had 45 patents, which is incredible. And he was so humble about it. He was like, I have 45. This guy has 200. I'm like, wow. Just incredible. And we saw that they're building the new fab, which will be 3x almost their capacity. And I was thinking that when you look at the value chain that it takes to build that, it creates so many opportunities for entrepreneurs to even support the build-up of that facility. And so it's not just even just plugging into the value chain, if you will, of semiconductor, it just creates an entire set of opportunities for Boise entrepreneurs. And this is why we believe the CHIPS and Science Act that the president passed, and it's been a bipartisan bill, which is awesome, is a historic industrial policy that we haven't done as a country, which actually impacts not only making the chips industry more resilient and resolving supply chain issues, but creating all these downstream opportunities for entrepreneurs who can plug into the buildup of the semiconductor industry, whether it's in Boise or upstate New York. So anyways, hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, I think so. Interesting you talk about ag tech with Simplot right here as well. And Mayor, you had something to say about that.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in on a couple things. But first I'll pick up on CHIPS and Science Act, because that was key in making it possible for our companies to compete on a global scale. But part of what was anticipated and that every time I talk with Micron, it's the and science piece. And I was at the National Lab, and we're like, and science, because that's often a forgotten part of it. But it makes possible, it envisions investments in and science that supports things like chips manufacturing. And we have an opportunity through that. There was a report, I can't remember if it was the APES committee or what the letters were, but a group of much smarter technologists than me recommended that there be centers of excellence around the country for the different parts and pieces of the CHIPS Act, one of it which is chips manufacturing. And we have an opportunity, as you said, with all the offshoots to both support the development of the fab, but then to grow the impact and research and development and excellence really around next generation chips manufacturing is an opportunity that I see here and Micron sees as well. And the CHIPS Act does as well, because they anticipated that with some of the funding proposals. But I would say that so often, people talk about flyover country, and that was cool language for a while, but mid-sized cities were forgotten. And then you see capital flowing, like all of a sudden everybody wanted to go to Birmingham and invest in companies there, and venture capitalists would do bus tours and tour what was happening in Birmingham in the Midwest as flyover country. But with COVID, what we saw was there's a rise in mid-sized cities. And so I would actually say that I'm bullish for Boise entrepreneurs, because there's opportunity now to connect with folks in a different way, and people are thinking differently about the life that we have here, the places where investments can and should be made, and digging more into what it is to be and to work and to innovate and then build businesses in mid-sized cities. And it's not about bringing people here to do it, but it's about figuring out how, for me as a city, we can be supportive to all of you and helping you connect with those you need to connect with. I had a startup say to me that they're a Stage.0 company, and what they struggle with often is convincing venture capitalists that Boise's a market that a company from Boise should be invested in because they're Boise. I always believe that once the first brave person does it, then everybody starts to follow. But I want to know how it is that we can help tell the story that needs to be told to get that first, second, third, and then the onslaught of funders to be willing to invest in a startup that's based here in Boise. Because our people have shown that we've got the ideas, we have the persistence, we're used to figuring out how to do it on our own from a global perspective, but with the community working side by side from us, and making those investments now and into the future in Boise companies will be good for those that'll take a return from that, but better for our companies as we grow here. And it becomes more and more of a proposition that's possible if we're all working together. So if the city's being helpful in terms of how we talk about the place, the ecosystem, the growth in the ecosystem, and the companies here, that Trailhead has a role in that, that we're all kind of talking about it in the same way to support businesses. I think there's a lot of opportunity. And I think that the smartest people are starting to figure out that they ought to be investing in our entrepreneurs and startups, and that we will likely see more soon.
This will be for both of you, and sort of expanding on that. Intentionally, maybe we've talked about a lot, growing the entrepreneurial ecosystem. How can we all do that intentionally? Is it just convening, connecting folks? Mayor, you first, please.
I'd say we have to do it intentionally, but it's going to be a mix of intention and kind of happenstance and magic at the same time. Because I think about it, this isn't data, but this is the experience that I've had here. So my husband and I, Scott took an interview with Micron and a job with Hewlett-Packard in 1998. And so we were here, and he was in the tech space, and at that point there were two big companies. There were some folks from Extended Systems that were here, and then some offshoots. But the ecosystem wasn't deep. About 7 years later, he left Hewlett-Packard, and he really wanted to go to startup. He joined a company called PacSense. It was a teeny tiny company. They did these little temperature sensors they'd throw in stuff, and you'd gauge the temperature in trucks as things moved around. But when he was looking for that job, he'd go to the spaces where entrepreneurs were, and it was just relatively small group of people. You had the ProClarity folks, the Extended Systems folks, Micron and Hewlett-Packard people, not a lot. After PacSense, he went to Healthwise. Don, the founder of Healthwise, was here for a little bit. He took a break from tech, kind of, and then ultimately joined Count and then Truckstop. But 10 years ago when he went to Count, again, he was talking to the same folks about the opportunities that might exist. 4 years ago when he went to Truckstop, he'd walk into a room and there were more people to talk to. There were more people that were starting companies. It wasn't the same group of guys that had done really well on a couple companies, so we're starting a new one, but the ecosystem had started to grow. And now when he walks into rooms, and when I walk into Trailhead and other places, I'd say in the last 4 years, the ecosystem has really changed. And that wasn't just by happenstance. Yes, people have done well, and some of the models around equity have changed, so that makes it possible for others to start companies that couldn't before. But you had folks like Jason and Faisal and Karen that said we've got to create an like the support, the infrastructure, if you will, for the ecosystem to be able to support a tech economy to grow here. And so I think it's been no accident that we've seen that change in the last 6 to 7 years, because it really corresponds with when Trailhead came to be and became more involved in the picture. But moving forward, we have to maintain that intentionality, create spaces for people to come together, so that's where the magic happens, where you start to see folks interconnecting and new ideas come from it. But importantly, companies, and now in some ways because we can all work remotely and wages are competitive, we've got to make sure, and a city can't do this, but make sure that the folks in these spaces are sharing in the wealth that's being generated so they can become the next risk takers to create the next startup to do the same for those folks that they hire. And when we start to see that coupled with the intentional work around Trailhead and some of the accelerators that exist here, and we tell the story about why investment should be made in companies that are here, I expect that we'll see the ecosystem grow exponentially.
Special Representative.
Look, it's a tough question. I would agree with everything you said. I think it has to be intentional. And I do think, having spent time in Silicon Valley most of my career, that you have to develop a culture where, frankly, failure is acceptable. And you can take risk. Because you're going to fail 5 times before you may succeed the 6th time. And then you fail again, and then you succeed. I mean, every single entrepreneur that we admire, if you look at their story, her or his, that's what it includes. And that is not a work of a few years, that is a work of a generation. And it happens by, yes, convening like this, by sharing stories, by having mentors, by having people's back when no one has their back, by creating that very supportive. I asked a question to TM, what is the structure of this entity? It's a nonprofit, that's terrific. But really building these institutions, because it takes a long time to have a protective environment where failure is acceptable and you're going to have each other. Because it's a mindset that you have to buy into for you to go on with this entrepreneurial path. The second thing that I genuinely strongly believe is that one of the key ingredients is mentorship. Like really, really identifying people that you can go to advice for. What I really enjoyed, and I think for most part, the Bay Area still maintains that the ethos that you could go for advice to almost anyone in a non-transactional manner, without wondering what's in it for them or me. And that's if we can develop that, that will just pay so much dividends. Because we all know we've needed advice on something, and if you could just get good advice, it's priceless. It's a decision to hire someone. It could be about funding. It could be just a leadership moment you're having where you need clarity and help, or just even share and soundboard with someone who challenges. That can really pay it forward. The other thing that I would say is, which is something I'm personally very passionate about, it is very important that as you are in the formative mode for building this ecosystem, it is truly inclusive. And I want to repeat the word inclusive by adding the word intentionally inclusive. We have seen far too long, and the Bay Area is one example of that, where it's not broad-based. We have had challenges with women leading firms. We don't have as many women entrepreneurs as we should be. We don't have as many African American Latino entrepreneurs as we should be. there is no reason why it has to repeat in every new rising hub. We should learn the lessons of what we need to do differently. So before I joined the administration, and I hold myself to account even in government for this, is we go outside our comfort zone to reach out in networks that are not ours or look like us, to recruit from people who are women, who are minorities. Here is why. It's not because it is a DIA initiative, which is important, and it's not, but it cannot be a checkbox. It is also good policy, because the reality is we cannot succeed until we really have broad-based talent that can support the 5 new microns 10 years, 20 years from now. And they won't all come from one community or one gender. They will come from everywhere. And the work for that starts yesterday, because it takes almost, like you made a point, it takes almost a generation to train people in STEM, then to promote, encourage them to take up a career in data or computing or sales and marketing in the tech world. So that's something I think we just collectively, local, state, federal, we have to do. And I feel at the end of the day, that's where the winners in the world will be picked up. Who has the broad-based, truly level playing field when it comes to folks from any community, any background, having the same access to resources and opportunities. And if we don't get that right, frankly, we'll run into challenges soon, whether it's Boise or Austin, Texas, or Nashville or Silicon Valley. So that's something that I think it's on all of us. So those are my couple of thoughts on this.
Yeah. Awesome, and interesting that so much of that is happening this week. Anyone have any questions for either the mayor or special representative? Oh, way in the back.
Yeah. Hi, I work for the one and only international marketing firm in Idaho. We do multilingual design and campaigns and social media, websites, apps, like everything is full service. And I've seen all of our clients change their lives with the website. So my question is there any partnership or program that companies like this can apply with the city to help more people here in Idaho have these opportunities in their business?
Great question. What's your company called?
The Digital House.
Okay. We have a couple programs because of the recovery dollars we had, where we were able to support small businesses, minority-owned businesses, art-oriented businesses that we've done. The city doesn't necessarily have grant funds, the Department of Commerce might, so the state, to invest in companies to then invest in other companies. So what I think that the best place to look, because of the kind of focus of different levels of government, is at the state's Department of Commerce for things like that. What we as a city tend to do more is determine how we can use our resources, which is often people, and to leverage for impact. So in our community engagement department, we too now have a language access coordinator and someone that's charged with building out the connections and support that we offer to folks that speak different languages, as well as making our own website more accessible. And we work in partnership with organizations in the community to do it the right way. Or you might see us, as we've said, partner with Trailhead in terms of helping to provide some facilities and base costs and support so that they can then leverage their services. But typically, direct grants would come from the state.
Good question, thank you. We've actually hit our out time. I think we've taken a lot of time for you folks. If there's no other questions, I maybe just had one. You talked about inclusivity. Is that something that would also include inclusivity as far as skill level goes, specializations, where people are in their careers, for giving them chances?
Yes, in fact, as you were saying that, not only that, vocational training, but also underserved regions. I think we often run into the folly that we focus on one metro region, and frankly, we just may not pay as much attention on what's around us. And You mentioned that Boise is one of the more isolated cities, if you will, right, in the country. So we gotta like really make sure that we are not. Again, we've seen this, in every second state that you have a couple of metros that do really well, but when you go outside, things look very different. So of course, I would say inclusivity not beyond just the diversity angle, but also, when it comes to education, vocational training, but also regional diversity as well.
Fantastic. Well, I think if you both wouldn't mind just sort of buttoning up our conversation here real quick, it's been fantastic. Mayor, if you wouldn't mind just taking a couple minutes.
I was just going to say thank you very much.
Well done. Brevity is the soul of wit. Special
Good job.
Representative, can you do better?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
They nailed it. Thank you so much.